In the year 1984, in the neighborhood of Sallabiya, a strange tale began to spread. It concerned a young woman, stateless and poor, yet constantly drawing the attention of her neighbors. She lived with her family in a modest house, and though they appeared ordinary, whispers about her behavior quickly traveled beyond their street. Among their neighbors was a respected family. The father was known for his piety, and his young son, a devoted student at the mosque, carried the hopes of his household. He was bright, disciplined, and destined, it seemed, for a good and honorable future. The young woman, however, became fixated on him. Each time he returned from prayers, she would sit by her door, waiting to see him pass. At first, her glances were shy and fleeting. Soon, they grew bolder, gestures, words, and attempts to catch his attention. The boy treated her as one would treat a sister or neighbor, politely and without suspicion. But her persistence unsettled him. She lingered at his doorstep, intercepted him in the street, and whispered things that embarrassed him deeply. When he ignored her, she threatened to create scandal, to drag his name into rumors he could not escape. Neighbors began to notice. Some pitied her, claiming she was afflicted with a psychological illness. Others condemned her, calling her shameless and reckless. Either way, the pressure on the boy grew unbearable. He withdrew further into his studies, hoping silence would protect him from disgrace. But silence did not stop her. The girl's behavior escalated. One night, she disguised herself in military clothing, stole her brother's car, and wandered recklessly through the city. She was recognized, exposed, and humiliated. Her family's name trembled under the weight of her actions, and the whispers grew louder. The boy's family was caught in the storm. They had done nothing, yet their son's honor was constantly threatened by her obsession. The father, respected in his community, feared that a single rumor could destroy everything he had built. It was not long before the matter reached the authorities. Questions were asked. Was this girl mentally ill? Or was she dangerous, calculating, and determined to ruin reputations? The story, however, was only beginning. The scandal of that night did not put an end to the girl's actions. On the contrary, it seemed to drive her further into chaos. Her obsession with the boy deepened. She left notes near his house, attempted to corner him when he returned from prayers, and even threatened to destroy herself if he continued to reject her. To many, she seemed possessed by something beyond reason. The boy's life became suffocating. Wherever he went, he felt her eyes following him. His companions at the mosque began to whisper. He feared that even a false word could tarnish his reputation forever. Her family, ashamed and overwhelmed, tried to silence the rumors. They claimed she was ill, that she needed sympathy rather than judgment. But the neighborhood had seen too much. Each incident added fuel to the fire of gossip, and every family feared being drawn into her web of disgrace. One evening, matters took a darker turn. The girl disguised herself again, this time veiling her face and pretending to be someone else. She slipped into gatherings where she did not belong, listening, watching, searching for ways to entangle the boy's name with hers. But lies have a way of unraveling. People began to recognize her voice, her walk, the small details she could not conceal. Soon she was exposed again. The boy, though innocent, was now a prisoner of the rumors. He must have encouraged her, some said. No girl behaves like this without reason. Others defended him, swearing that his piety and manners made it impossible. Yet the whispers spread faster than truth ever could. Her behavior became more reckless. There were nights when she was seen wandering alone in places no woman of honor would dare to be. Some swore they saw her entering deserted buildings. Others claimed she consorted with men of ill repute. For the boy's family, every passing day was heavier than the last. His father pleaded with him to endure, to remain steadfast in his faith and studies. "The truth will prevail," he said, but the son knew truth meant little against the weight of rumor. And then, one day, the matter slipped beyond the neighborhood. By the middle of 1985, the scandal had grown too large for Sallabiya to contain. What had once been only gossip whispered between women at doorsteps was now the subject of quiet conversations in other districts. Everyone seemed to know of the girl who would not relent. the stateless young woman who chased a boy of piety and honor, threatening his name with every reckless act. At first, the authorities treated the reports lightly. "She is disturbed," one officer wrote in his notes. "Perhaps an illness of the mind." But the complaints kept coming. Each week brought a new story. A disguise in a stolen car. A late-night appearance at places no woman of her standing should enter. Rumors of theft, deceit, and even violent threats. The police files thickened, and with them suspicion. Some officers scoffed. Others leaned back in their chairs and muttered, "There is more here than madness. Perhaps she serves someone. Perhaps she is being used." Inside her own home, her family waged a hopeless battle. Her father, exhausted, shouted at her until his voice broke, then fell silent in despair. Her mother wept at night, pressing her face into her veil so the neighbors would not hear. "Stay inside," they commanded. "Do not shame us further." Yet by some trick, through windows, rooftops, or friends who aided her, she always escaped. She returned at dawn with the wild look of someone who had been elsewhere, in places her parents dared not imagine. They pleaded with neighbors. "She is ill. Forgive her. Do not believe the worst." But patience had worn thin. The neighborhood was tired of excuses. For the boy's family, the suffering was heavier still. His father had spent a lifetime building respect in the community, his reputation polished through prayer, generosity, and discipline. Now, with a single girl's obsession, all of it trembled like fragile glass. The boy himself, still young, with eyes bright from study, felt as though a shadow had fallen over his life. At the mosque, his teachers tried to reassure him. "Do not fear, my son. If your heart is clean, God will protect your name." But whispers swirled like smoke behind his back. "No girl disgraces herself like this without cause," some muttered. Perhaps he led her on. Perhaps there is a secret. The boy avoided their eyes. He hurried home from prayers, head bowed, his sandals scuffing the dust of the street. Each day, his world grew smaller, as though the walls of Sallabiya itself were closing in around him. And then came the night she appeared at his very doorstep. He had just returned from evening prayers when he saw her standing there, cloaked in black, her face veiled but her trembling voice unmistakable. "Enough silence," she cried, her words breaking between sobs and fury. "If you will not accept me, I will end my life, and I will take your name down with me." The boy stood frozen in the doorway. The lantern's light caught her shaking hands. For a moment, he felt both pity and terror, pity for her broken state, terror for the ruin she threatened to bring. Finally, with a heavy heart, he shut the door. He said nothing. But silence has its own echo. By morning, the story of her visit had already spread through the neighborhood, carried from mouth to mouth until even strangers spoke of it. The scandal was no longer rumor. It was a storm. The morning after the doorstep incident, Sallabiya buzzed like a hive disturbed. Women exchanged knowing glances as they fetched water. Men muttered under their breath at the cafes, shaking their heads with a mix of pity and disdain. Children whispered the story in alleys, repeating fragments they had overheard from their parents. She went to his door at night. She threatened herself and him. She is possessed, or maybe he is not as innocent as they say. In a neighborhood where honor was currency, every word was a coin cast into the fire. The boy's father sat in silence that morning, his prayer beads sliding restlessly through his fingers. He had once been a man whose presence commanded respect. Now, when he walked the street, people greeted him with forced courtesy, their eyes filled with doubt. "My son," he said at last, his voice low and strained, "a man can withstand hunger, illness, even exile, but he cannot survive the loss of his name. You must endure, speak to no one, look only to God." The boy nodded, though the words pressed on his chest like a stone. For the girl, shame seemed to feed her defiance rather than weaken it. When her mother confronted her, eyes swollen from tears, hands trembling, the girl only laughed bitterly. "You do not understand. He belongs to me. If he refuses me, I will make sure he belongs to no one." Her father raised his hand in fury, but let it fall before striking her. Instead, he turned away, his shoulders bent beneath an invisible burden. The neighbors shook their heads. Some declared she was mad beyond saving. Others claimed she was cunning, fully aware of the destruction she sowed. Whatever the truth, the result was the same: a community held hostage by her obsession. The boy withdrew further. He no longer lingered at the mosque after prayers. He avoided markets and gatherings, keeping his eyes fixed on the ground. But silence, instead of protecting him, only deepened suspicion. One evening, an old man approached him outside the mosque. "Son," he said gently, "sometimes silence is not enough. Sometimes a man must speak to defend his honor." The boy lowered his gaze. "If I speak, they will say I am hiding something. If I remain silent, they say the same. I have only God." The old man sighed, knowing the boy was trapped in a snare with no way out. By now, Sallabiya itself was divided. Some pitied the boy and cursed the girl. Others whispered that there was more to the story than anyone dared to admit. And in the middle of it all, the girl continued her reckless path, appearing in the streets at odd hours, disappearing for nights, reappearing with wild eyes and disheveled clothes. The scandal no longer belonged to a single family. It was a wound in the heart of the entire neighborhood. And wounds, left untended, only grow deeper. By the end of that summer, the girl's behavior had slipped beyond what even her own family could explain. Neighbors whispered that she no longer belonged to the daylight. At dusk, when lamps were lit and shutters closed, she would slip silently into the streets, her figure veiled and restless. Some saw her packing alleys alone. Others swore they had seen her entering deserted houses as though chasing shadows. A few claimed she had taken to wandering the outskirts of Sallabiya, near the wastelands where only stray dogs and the homeless roamed. "She is like a spirit now," one woman muttered, clutching her scarf tighter. "Not of this world, nor of the next." Her parents lived in torment. Her father, once a man who carried himself with dignity, now walked hunched, avoiding the eyes of his neighbors. Her mother rarely left the house. When visitors came, she apologized again and again, her voice thin from exhaustion. "She is not well. Pray for her. Forgive her." But no prayers seemed to bind the girl. Each night she found a way to escape, and each dawn she returned, eyes fevered, lips whispering things no one could understand. Her brothers tried to restrain her. One night, they locked the doors and windows, only to wake in the morning and find her gone, her bed cold. When she returned hours later, she smirked at them as though mocking their efforts. "You cannot cage me," she said simply, before retreating into silence. For the boy, her nightly wanderings only deepened his torment. "She will ruin us," his father said, voice heavy with despair. "It is only a matter of time before her madness drags your name through filth." The boy prayed longer hours, pressing his forehead to the ground until his skin bore the marks of devotion. Yet even in prayer, her shadow lingered in his mind. Sometimes, on his way back from the mosque, he would sense her presence, hidden in an alley or watching from a doorway. When he turned, there was nothing, yet his skin prickled as though unseen eyes still followed him. He confided once to a close friend, "Even in my dreams she pursues me. I wake in fear, as if she is there beside me, whispering my ruin." By now, Sallabiya had formed its judgment. "She is possessed," some declared. "She is wicked," others insisted. But whether mad or calculating, all agreed on one thing: she was dangerous. The boy's family grew isolated. Neighbors who once visited freely now kept their distance. Invitations to weddings, to gatherings, ceased. The house that had once stood proud among them became a place of unease. And yet, despite all this, the girl showed no sign of stopping. Her obsession burned hotter with each rejection, each silence. It was as though she had made a covenant with herself. If she could not have him, she would destroy him, and herself if necessary. The night was her ally. The neighborhood was her stage, and her story was only beginning to twist into darker shapes. The mosque had always been the boy's refuge. Within its walls, he found peace, discipline, and the guidance of elders who treated him like a son. But as the girl's scandal spread, even this sanctuary began to feel fragile. When he entered for prayers, he felt eyes turn toward him. Some were full of pity, others sharp with suspicion. Conversations fell silent as he passed. The sound of whispered judgment clung to him like dust. One evening after prayer, the imam called him aside. The boy's hands trembled as he sat before the old man, the murmur of Quran recitations echoing faintly in the background. "My son," the imam said gently, "you walk under a heavy trial. Do not let whispers shake your faith. Truth is light, and lies cannot hide from God forever." The boy lowered his gaze. "Master, even if truth shines, will people see it? Or will they only see the shadow that follows me?" The imam placed a hand on his shoulder. "Patience. A man is not ruined by what others say, but by what he answers. Guard your silence as you have, but guard also your heart. Do not let despair creep into it." The boy nodded, though inside he felt only weariness. Outside the mosque, the girl's presence lingered like an unseen spirit. Some nights she stood at the edge of the street, veiled and silent, waiting for him to emerge. Other times she followed from a distance, her steps measured, careful not to be seen too easily. There were even those who claimed they saw her circling the mosque itself, as though trying to bind it in her obsession. "She waits for him like a predator," one witness murmured. "Not even the house of God can shield him." At home, the boy's father felt the weight of every rumor. He could not walk to the market without hearing whispers carried on the air. His son must have encouraged her. "No girl goes mad like that for nothing." The words pierced him deeper than knives. He returned each day with bowed head, his dignity crumbling piece by piece. At night, he prayed alone, whispering into the silence, "O Lord, if this is a test, grant us strength. If this is a curse, lift it from us before we are destroyed." The scandal was now more than gossip. It was a wound splitting the neighborhood apart. Some households avoided the boy's family, fearing their own daughters might be dragged into rumors. Others avoided the girl's family, claiming they had raised a curse upon Sallabiya. But there were those who found entertainment in the drama, repeating every new detail with relish, feeding the fire that burned both families. One night after returning from the mosque, the boy sat alone under the stars. He clasped his hands together and whispered, "Lord, I have no weapon against her but silence. If it is my fate to be ruined, let it be by your will, not hers." Far away, hidden in the shadows of a narrow alley, a pair of eyes glistened in the dark, watching, waiting. The girl had not finished. Her story, and his, was still winding toward its breaking point. The next morning, Sallabiya was unusually quiet. Even the usual chatter of the market seemed hushed, as if the neighborhood itself held its breath. The girl had appeared early, moving with deliberate steps, her eyes fixed on the boy's house across the street. She did not speak to anyone. She did not stop for greetings. Her presence alone carried a warning, and the people who saw her instinctively stepped aside. Inside the boy's home, tension was almost unbearable. The father stood by the window, watching the girl's shadow cross the street. He clenched his fists and muttered under his breath, "This ends today." He called his son into the room. The boy obeyed silently, feeling the weight of his father's unspoken plan pressing down on him. "Enough hiding," his father said. "We cannot let this girl's obsession ruin everything. She must face the truth, and we must face her." The boy nodded reluctantly, knowing that confrontation could ignite chaos, but also that inaction had only made things worse. Outside, the girl sensed the shift. She stopped mid-step and turned, eyes blazing, as though she had known the moment was coming. The boy's father stepped onto the street, his figure firm and unyielding. Behind him, the boy followed, silent and tense. "You have caused enough trouble," the father said, his voice carrying across the narrow street. "Your obsession has no place here. Speak the truth now or leave our neighborhood forever." The girl laughed, a sound both cruel and unnerving. "Leave," she whispered. "I am everywhere. I am the shadow you cannot escape." For the first time, the boy felt fear, not for himself, but for the chaos that could follow. The neighbors watched from behind curtains and doorways, breath held, unsure whether to intervene. The girl took a step closer, her voice rising. "I warned you. I told him to listen. I told him that if he did not answer me, he would belong to no one. And now. Her eyes locked on the boy. He felt her gaze like fire, burning away any thought of escape. The father raised his hand, not to strike, but to command. Enough, he said. You will speak here in front of everyone. No threats, no whispers, only the truth if you have it. The girl hesitated. For a moment, her bravado faltered. Her lips quivered, revealing a glimpse of vulnerability beneath the mask of fury. She began, but stopped, scanning the street. The neighbors leaned forward, eager for the revelation. The boy swallowed hard, praying silently that whatever came next would not destroy him or his family. The street was silent, every neighbor holding their breath. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if waiting for the girl's next words. She took a deep breath, the heat of her fury flickering like a flame, then settled into a steadier, colder resolve. Her voice cut across the street. I have told him everything. He ignored me, laughed at my warnings, pretended I was nothing. And now. She stepped closer to the boy, her eyes locking on his. For a fleeting second, the fire of her obsession softened into something almost human, a desperation, a longing. The boy flinched. He wanted to look away, to retreat into silence, but he couldn't. Her gaze held him fast. The father stepped forward, placing himself between his son and the girl. This ends now, he said firmly. If you wish to speak, speak to me. If not, leave this street and never return. Do you understand? The girl's eyes darted from the father to the boy and back again. For the first time, she seemed uncertain. The power she had wielded over the streets, over whispers and shadows, faltered in the face of authority. I cannot leave, she said, her voice trembling. Not yet, he must understand. The neighbors peeked from behind shutters and doors. Some murmured prayers under their breath. The boy's mother appeared in the doorway, clutching her shawl tightly, a silent plea in her eyes. The father looked at her, then at his son. You have been patient. You have endured her games, but this must end tonight. Speak the truth or face the consequences. For a moment, it seemed she might retreat, vanish into the shadows once more. But then she raised her chin, squared her shoulders, and spoke, her voice trembling but defiant. I will tell the truth, but only if he listens, only if he hears me fully. Otherwise, all of this means nothing. The boy's heart pounded. He did not know what she would say, nor what she would reveal. Yet in that instant, the balance of power shifted. No longer was she a ghost haunting him from the shadows. She was real, vulnerable, and dangerously close to breaking everything. The neighbors watched, frozen in anticipation. The air was thick with tension. The night seemed to lean closer, holding its breath with them. And in that suspended silence, the first cracks in the girl's fury began to show, offering a glimmer of hope, and a warning that what came next could change everything. The girl's eyes were wide, her hands trembling slightly as she looked at the boy, then at his father. The entire street seemed to hold its breath. Even the usual morning sounds, the calls of merchants, the clatter of carts, had fallen silent, as though the neighborhood itself waited for the truth to emerge. I will speak, she said finally, her voice low but steady. Everything that happened, everything I did, I will not hide it anymore. The boy's father stepped closer, his eyes sharp and unwavering. Start from the beginning, he commanded. Do not skip a single detail. The entire neighborhood is watching, and I will not tolerate lies. The girl took a deep breath. She spoke of the first moments she had fixated on the boy, how her obsession had grown from small gestures, watching him from a distance, trying to catch his attention, to bold actions. Sending messages, leaving notes, attempting to manipulate situations to make him notice her. I thought I could control it, she admitted, her voice breaking. I thought I could make him care, but I was wrong. I went too far. She told of the night she had taken his brother's car, of the rumors she had spread, of the moments she had deliberately created chaos to ensure he would be forced to look at her. Each word left the street in stunned silence. The boy remained still, his jaw tight. He felt a mixture of fear, anger, and relief. Fear for what she might do next. Anger for the chaos she had caused in his family's life. Relief that at last the truth was out. I never asked for this, he said quietly. I never encouraged you. I never wanted any of it. The girl's gaze flickered, as though searching for a sign of forgiveness, or perhaps a sign that he would finally act to stop her. The father exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. You have caused harm, he said, addressing the girl directly. Not only to my son, but to this entire neighborhood. You will be held accountable, but truth is better than lies. You have chosen to speak it. That counts for something. He turned to the boy. Do you understand that the danger has not passed? You must remain vigilant. Do not trust appearances. And yet, now that we know the truth, we can act to protect ourselves. The neighbors, who had been holding their breath, began murmuring amongst themselves. Some expressed shock, others relief that the mystery was finally unraveling. Whispers of "at last," and "so it was true," floated through the street. The girl stood silently, aware that her actions had consequences. She realized that her power, built on fear and obsession, had limits. And in that moment, the first hint of humility appeared on her face, a recognition that her obsession had almost destroyed everything, including herself. The revelation left a heavy silence in Sallabiya. Even after the girl finished her confession, no one moved. It was as though the street itself was processing the storm that had just passed. The boy's father stepped forward, his face hard but not without compassion. You will face consequences for your actions, he said to the girl. The law, the authorities, and your own conscience. But you spoke the truth, and that is the first step toward justice. The girl nodded, her head bowed slightly. She had expected anger, punishment, perhaps even exile from the neighborhood, but there was a strange sense of relief in being confronted with the reality of her actions. You will be referred to the authorities, the father continued. Your obsession endangered not only my son but your own future. You must understand that actions have weight and lies carry far. The boy watched silently, his chest tight with a mix of fear, anger, and the faintest sense of relief. For years, he had lived under the shadow of her obsession, and now, for the first time, the truth was out. Within hours, the local authorities arrived. The girl was taken to the police station, where she gave a full, detailed statement. Every act, every message, every incident was documented. She faced her accountability, and while the law was stern, her honesty allowed some measure of leniency. The boy's family provided their testimony, carefully describing the fear, confusion, and social chaos caused by her actions. They insisted that while the girl's behavior had been dangerous, she had finally cooperated fully. Back in the neighborhood, whispers ran through the streets. People had long speculated about the girl's actions, but now the truth was confirmed. Some were shocked at the depth of her obsession, others were relieved that clarity had finally arrived. Yet the balance of the neighborhood had shifted. People now watched more closely, aware of how quickly obsession could turn ordinary life into chaos. The boy's reputation, previously shadowed by rumors, began to clear. His careful demeanor and integrity were praised by neighbors who had once doubted him. Alone in the police station, the girl had time to think. She reflected on the choices that had brought her here, the obsession, the manipulations, the escalating chaos. For the first time, she faced the truth of her own actions, not as power, not as control, but as consequence. Her pride, her fury, her sense of entitlement had crumbled. She realized that the road ahead would be difficult, regaining trust, understanding boundaries, and accepting responsibility. But in that acceptance lay a seed of redemption. The girl was formally sentenced. The court recognized her repeated manipulations and the fear she had instilled in her neighbor and the community. Yet her full cooperation and honest confession allowed for a more measured outcome. She received a sentence that balanced accountability with the opportunity for rehabilitation, a clear message that actions have consequences, but redemption is possible. She left the courtroom quietly, her head bowed, finally confronted with the reality of her choices. The streets of Sallabiya whispered about her, but the fear that had once loomed over the neighborhood began to fade. The boy, finally free from the shadow of her obsession, began to reclaim his life. He returned to his studies at the mosque, resumed daily routines, and rebuilt the trust of neighbors who had doubted him. The ordeal had scarred him with memories of fear and tension, but it also strengthened his sense of responsibility, resilience, and prudence. He learned to navigate attention carefully, knowing that appearances could be deceiving and that vigilance was necessary. But he also felt a sense of closure that had long eluded him. Slowly, Sallabiya returned to its ordinary rhythm. Neighbors who had watched the unfolding drama from their windows began to feel safe again. Children played in the streets without fear, and the old market resumed its lively chatter. The shadow of obsession that had haunted the area dissipated, replaced by cautious optimism and mutual respect. The father of the boy became a quiet guardian of order, making sure the lessons of the ordeal were remembered. The importance of truth, the danger of obsession, and the need for community vigilance. From prison, the girl began a difficult path of self-reflection. She understood the consequences of her obsession and realized that control through fear or manipulation had no lasting value. Over time, she committed herself to learning, growth, and understanding the weight of her actions. Redemption would be a slow journey, but she had taken the first, crucial step. The saga of Sallabiya, of obsession, fear, courage, and truth, ended not in tragedy but in resolution. The boy lived on, his life intact, his reputation restored. The girl faced justice but had the chance to learn and change. And the neighborhood, once tense and fearful, returned to the rhythms of everyday life, forever shaped by the lessons of this extraordinary story. Peace, finally, settled over Sallabiya. The story of the girl and the boy became a cautionary tale, spoken quietly in homes, markets, and mosques, reminding all who heard it that obsession and lies may create storms, but truth and accountability always bring the calm that follows. And that was the incredible story of Sallabiya, a tale of obsession, fear, and ultimately, truth and justice. It shows us how one person's actions can ripple through an entire community, and how courage and honesty can restore balance. Now we want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were in Sallabiya? Could you face the truth like the girl did, or act with courage like the boy? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if you were captivated by this story. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story that will make you think, feel, and question. Remember, every story has a lesson. Share yours, and let's continue the conversation together. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.